Hubs. We are a digital mobilization agency. We work with some really amazing progressive causes, and we help them really to grow their communities and maximize their impact. We do this by using lots of different digital channels, strategies, tools to find people online who share our partners' values and then really motivate them and engage them to take action and really stay engaged with their work. We usually do this through really carefully planned and tested campaigns. Data is really important in what we do, but sometimes we find ourselves reacting to an unfolding news story or a cultural moment which we find captures audience's attention. And we find that those can sometimes be some of the most impactful campaigns that we run, or kind of impactful moments. We've spoken to a few of you who said, oh, we want to be doing more of that, but we don't quite know where to start. How does it work? How do we talk about it to maybe senior leadership? What are some of the results, So this is why we're doing this session today. We will hear from my two brilliant colleagues, Beth Miles and Eve Flynn. Beth is a digital strategy manager. She leads one of our project teams here at Forward Action. And Eve is one of our digital strategy experts. She works with our partners to really plan and implement mobilization strategies. Both of them have worked with a real variety of partners. You will hear some examples of the work they've done today, but they include Refuge, Stonewall, Dignity in Dying, Care for Calais, a real variety in terms of cause and size of charity, I would say. So I will hand over to them in a moment. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I do, and then turn off my camera. So we have closed captions on. I think you can enable them. If you can't see them, please let us know in the chat, and we will let you know. We will let you know what you need to do. If you have any questions at all about the presentation, please ask them in the Q&A section. So there should be a little bubble at the bottom of your screen called Q&A. Pop your question in there. Alicia and I are collecting these questions, and we will be asking them at the end. We'll make sure we have about 10-15 minutes or so at the end to ask questions. Any questions we don't get to today, please don't worry. We will take them away and we will answer them, write them up and publish them in a few days' time. If you have any tech issues at all, let us know. You can message us directly, the hosts, Alicia and me, and we will be here to support you. And I think that's it. I will hand over now to Beth.
Great, thanks so much, Stella, and welcome everyone. It's lovely to have you all here with us today. We've got a jam-packed session, so I'm just going to dive straight in. In terms of what we're going to be running through today, we're going to talk about what we kind of mean by responding quickly, and the kind of the things that might be happening that might lead you to want to or need to respond quickly as an organisation. As Stella has already teased, we're going to be going through lots of different examples of how we've worked with partners to put this into practice, kind of across the board, and hopefully some of that will be really inspiring, and yeah, give you a kind of a bit of a flavour of how we've done this and the kind of results that it might have in your kind of on your campaigns or your kind of programmes. We're going to talk a little bit around how you can actually do this, putting this into putting this into practice yourself, and how you can kind of set yourself up to actually do this within the work that you do. Then we'll share some kind of final thoughts that we have about kind of what you can do next, or things to think about to actually get started. And then as Stella has said, we'll have hopefully, if we don't waffle on too long, I'm very guilty of that, we'll have some time for a Q&A. And yeah, of course, if there are any questions that we don't get around to, we can follow up with you. So why might you guys be here? This isn't an exhaustive list, but some of the things that we were thinking about are that you might work in fundraising and you're looking for kind of new hooks and angles to bring into your kind of fundraising messaging to make that feel really fresh and urgent, and hopefully drive income. You might be a campaigner and you're kind of wanting to respond to what's happening politically as kind of part of your campaigning, and kind of using the things that are happening, or sound bites or quotes that politicians might be kind of putting out into the world at the moment, things like that, to help you kind of drive more petition signatures or other campaigning actions. You might be a manager and you might be thinking, I really want to do this, but I don't think we're quite set up in the right way as a team yet to actually deliver on this. So it might be that you're here to think about how to kind of create a process that is really effective and will help your kind of team respond really quickly. You might not be any of those things. You might work in completely different teams, but you think that your organization should be doing this, but you're not totally sure what your next steps are. Or it might be that you have done this already, and we'll hear from you in the next slide as to whether you have tried this or not. But maybe you've not been able to make this work, or you want to kind of hear a little bit more about how other people have done this. So hopefully the kind of content that we'll go through today will, as I say, give you some kind of ideas about some of this, and kind of how you can actually take this away and do this yourself. So first things first, I hope everyone's had their morning caffeine, if that is your bag, and is kind of ready to answer a question, which is, have you guys responded to real life events within your campaigns already? So I think you should be seeing a poll soon. So we want to hear from you whether you have, whether you haven't, or whether you're not really sure if you have or not. All super interesting for us to sort of understand. And I think a poll should have just popped up for you to answer now. So I'll give you a kind of, I'll say a minute, probably don't have a minute, but 30 seconds to pop in your answer, just to sort of see kind of who's kind of started doing some of this already. Stella, are we getting some votes in?
I think, yeah, so I can see the poll. I'm not seeing the results yet. So let's see if
mystery.
I know it is a mystery. Zoom polls can sometimes be mysterious that way. And I can see now that 79% of you have said that yes, you have already tried some of these tactics, and 9 of you have said no.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, fantastic. So we've got lots of people who are already starting to do this. That's brilliant. Really, really pleased to hear that. And yeah, it'd be great to kind of hear more about your experiences if you want to sort of drop and those in the chat, and if you want to kind of share those with the kind of webinar attendees today as well, how you've kind of been finding this. Brilliant. So we're going to move on to kind of what we're talking about. What do we mean really by responding quickly? So what we really mean here is we're talking basically about seeing things happen in the news. We're talking about current events unfolding or political developments that might be kind of happening sort of in real time, that are kind of relevant to like the work that you do, or could even be that there's sort of TV shows. It might be that your favorite soap opera, EastEnders, has a kind of storyline that is kind of unfolding and is kind of bringing up issues that are really relevant to the things that you kind of work on. And it's sort of about thinking about and understanding what is going on kind of externally, and then being able to kind of cultivate, create and send out really timely content and support actions based on those things that are really really relevant and really fresh and kind of top of mind for your supporters, to kind of help them understand kind of work that you do, but also give them the opportunity to respond really quickly and be able to talk about how urgent it is that someone is able to kind of take action for you. And the reason kind of for doing that is obviously to be keeping up and to be kind of being a voice for your supporters and for your kind of movement, and kind of keeping up with the news cycle, and being able to kind of be really relevant. But of course there's another kind of there are other reasons why you would want to do this as an organization, because it will help you basically further your campaigns. So if an ask is really urgent and it's really relevant, and because it's in the news and because it's in public consciousness and because it's something that is literally happening right now, if you're able to kind of put that out to your supporters, you're likely to drive more actions, whether that's kind of campaigning actions or other actions. And also a kind of spoiler alert, but some of the examples that we're going to run through in a couple of slides time have actually shown that kind of by doing this, you're able to drive kind of higher donate rates and average gifts, which obviously will lead to more income, and both more income and more actions will help you basically achieve your mission quicker. So you'll actually get to kind of the real world change that we're all here, what we're all working towards, and it will help you get to those things quicker by kind of doing this. So that's kind of why you might be here. That is what we're kind of talking about today. And I'm going to hand over to my wonderful colleague Eve, who's going to talk through some case studies about how we've kind of taken those TV moments, or we've taken those kind of unfolding news stories, or other things that have kind of happened externally, kind of cultural events, and how we've kind of been able to work with our wonderful partners to kind of put that into practice.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. So our first example here is when we responded to changing weather conditions, which doesn't necessarily sound like the most exciting or engaging topic, but actually talking about the weather and cold weather is a really effective way for Care for Calais to talk about the reality for refugees who are living in Calais, sleeping in tents without proper clothes and shoes. It's a really kind of powerful moment to bring that home. And so when the weather turned last November, we had a real big snowstorm in the UK and in Calais as well. We saw a real opportunity to bring that home and send an email out to supporters with a donate ask.
Eve, I think you've just broken up slightly for me.
Mind and consciousness. And Wi-Fi woes. Can you hear me now? Can you still hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, I'm on a hotspot because my Wi-Fi chose today to break, so apologies if that happens again. Yeah, it was the most successful email in our campaign with a donate rate that was 2.5 times higher than the rest of the series. And I think that's just because it tapped into a situation that everyone receiving the email could really relate to. Fab, yeah. And our next example here is with some work we did with Stonewall responding to an escalation in human rights abuses. So Stonewall worked with partners in Afghanistan and they were supporting LGBTQ+ refugees get to safety. As the situation was deteriorating, we knew we wanted to get an email out really quickly. And we saw that in the calendar, World Refugee Day was just a couple of days away. And we knew that that would be a kind of extra hook that would just make this even more timely and urgent. So again, we had a really quick process of drafting and sending the email within just a couple of days. And the email has been the most successful in terms of cash income that they've generated this year so far. We had a really nice high average gift as well of £28. And I think part of the reason for that was we were able to name a really clear target in the email. So it cost £5,000 to get safe passage for one refugee out of Afghanistan. And being able to kind of name that and use social proof to talk about how many people we needed to chip in, and then in a kicker, talk about how many people did chip in. That gave us an extra opportunity to raise more money without having to have any new content on this topic. So yeah, we've talked about responding to the news cycle, and it can be really effective to put that through in your imagery as well as in your creative, like copy. So in this example, we work with Care for Calais and we work with them for a while now, campaigning against the Rwanda plan. So we set up an initial petition style hand-raiser last year that we have been tweaking and evolving as there's been developments in the news cycle. And so this summer, the government was in court and this was around the Rwanda plan, yeah, and this was featured very heavily in the news. And so we pulled out some kind of breaking news headlines that supporters will have already seen and put those into graphics that were linking to our existing action page, just with slightly tweaked content. So this was something we were able to do really quickly, but because it was directly referencing kind of breaking news, it had real cut through, and the CPAs that we saw with this content were a lot lower than the campaign average, which obviously has a great impact of letting us recruit more people for the same budget. And so, yeah, we've seen graphics work really well, but we've also seen authentic kind of rough and ready footage and content work really well as well. So in this example, Care for Calais shared some footage with us that they'd captured on their phones from a counter protest against a far-right protest taking place outside a hotel housing refugees. So this footage, yeah, was just all stuff that they'd captured. It wasn't planned through, they didn't have a brief, they just took it on their phones and shared it with us. And the next morning, we used it to create some ad content, both for donations and for list growth acquisition. Again, this was really quick fire. We turned this around within a morning and got them live while the news story was still very much getting press coverage. And we saw brilliant results with these, but the lifespan of this content was quite short. So it was really high performing as the story was still being covered in the media. But as the news cycle moved on, performance did dip. And so we kept a close eye on performance and scaled back our spend as we saw that performance kind of dip, and turned back on our evergreen content in place of it. And this is just to say that recruiting supporters through these kind of reactive campaigns does lead to real world change. So we worked with Freedom from Torture way back last year to build a set of reactive hand raisers and acquisition tools. One of those was an open letter to Boris Johnson, so a bit of a blast from the past there, but around, against the Rwanda plan again. And they generated 46,000 new opt-ins for Freedom from Torture, which is obviously amazing scale to grow their email list, and provided a real opportunity for further action. And that's what Freedom from Torture did. They called on their supporters to put pressure on Privileged Style, who are an airline involved in the government's Rwanda scheme. And they wanted to put pressure on them to pull out of the scheme. And because they had all these supporters mobilised at scale, ready to take action for this cause, they were successful and they pulled out of the scheme, which is obviously an incredible real world achievement.
Great. And now I'm going to talk through a couple of examples of reacting to TV moments. So we've spoken a lot about kind of unfolding events and sort of political events, but of course that isn't the only place where content or kind of things might come to light that you might want to sort of jump on. So here is an example of a Greenpeace email that we sent asking supporters to make a regular gift. And again, this was from a couple of years ago when Blue Planet 2 was airing. I don't know about you, I was definitely one of the over 10 million people watching it. I absolutely I love Blue Planet and Green Planet and all the rest of them. Brilliant shows. But basically we sent out an email that was kind of talking about the show, and that was kind of the opener, and it was like, have you seen this? And it was very kind of friendly, sort of informal content in the first person from someone working at Greenpeace talking about that. But then quickly, as we kind of all know, in Blue Planet, often it will talk about kind of the wonders of the sort of natural world, but then and the animal world, but then it will kind of talk about the impact that kind of the climate crisis is having on this. So whilst kind of talking about the sort of the great stuff about the TV show, we were also then talking about the kind of climate crisis and kind of how that was sort of brought to light within the television programme. And then Greenpeace were able kind of to pivot and sort of say that, you know, that it's really saddening and really heartbreaking kind of what we have seen. And they kind of, we all need to kind of come together basically to help kind of protect the ocean from plastic pollution. And Greenpeace are kind of the organisation to sort of do that, and can you become a monthly supporter? And so just sending this this one email that we sent out ended up driving kind of 500 regular gifts to be set up, which is really, really brilliant. And I think that kind of sort of colloquial kind of and also that kind of that kind of colloquial kind of tone and that sort of shared experience of we know so many people are going to be watching this, and I'm watching this too, and that we're all kind of feeling the same things about watching it, was just like a really powerful kind of motivating framing for an email. And then a sort of second example of kind of responding to something that's happened sort of within TV. This is a kind of an example that is that it definitely had a supporter action kind of attached, but it was much more the kind of supporter action, or sort of the kind of goal, I guess, was kind of much more around kind of education and awareness, and sort of raising awareness about the impact that language, like how harmful language can be, and how that is kind of something that we should all kind of really be thinking about. So the example here is from an episode of Only Connect. I don't know if we've got any fans in the house. I really enjoy this programme. But there is a kind of part of the kind of show where kind of a set of words are kind of put out, and you have to kind of connect that kind of all relate to another word that you're trying to guess. And basically, there was an episode that was seeing the word, where the kind of mystery word was the word scar, and some of the words that were being used within to sort of describe that were quite harmful. So we work with a charity called Changing Faces, and they sent an email to supporters asking them to share an organic social post that they put out themselves that was demanding that the BBC issue an apology for conflating kind of those words. And what was really brilliant is that those people got involved and they won, and Victoria Coren Mitchell, who is the host of Only Connect, put out an apology, but also Changing Faces were able to kind of get a lot of coverage around this, and also were able to talk about their No Shame campaign, which kind of promotes kind of, you know, how that kind of word shouldn't be used in association with scars and yeah, other things. So that was a really kind of brilliant example of kind of using the sort of a TV moment to kind of sort of affect real world change and kind of get people thinking and talking about the use of and the kind of harmful use of language. And here we've got another example about the kind of use of kind of campaign updates to create new asks. So we've kind of spoken a lot about how we've kind of used existing campaigns and kind of then using what's happening in the news to sort of talk about those or kind of create new kind of copy variants. But this is an example of using what's going on in the news to actually create a new ask. So we work with Stonewall, who are an LGBTQ plus campaigning organisation. And they basically wanted to kind of recognise the fact that it's been 5 years since the UK government promised a ban on conversion therapy, and that they've kind of been at the forefront of that campaign in coalition with other organisations, kind of campaigning for a full ban on conversion therapy for 5 years. The government have not made good on their promise, and so we worked with Stonewall basically to launch a crowdfunder that had very like tangible and specific asks around Stonewall's kind of campaigning, how they'll be campaigning to kind of keep this on the political agenda and to campaign for a full ban in the kind of years to come. So we quite quickly, as I say, drafted a crowdfunder page that we promoted through the kind of acquisition funnel, but also through the email that you can see in front of you. And so far we've had kind of over 270 donors donate to that crowdfunder, but it will be live and kind of ongoing as that kind of campaign exists, and as that campaign kind of changes, we'll be able to update the copy of that crowdfunder and kind of make it really relevant. And I think what's really brilliant, obviously, for supporters is that this feels like a very tangible thing to donate to. So they're basically able, they're enabling Stonewall to kind of campaign on this really important issue, and they can kind of feel like what they're doing is like really relevant and is really going to help kind of push the dial on that campaign. And then I think this is our final example. And this is basically what we wanted to talk about, sending multiple updates and asks as stories change. So it would be brilliant if everything, the news cycle worked in a way that we could really predict, and that we could plan for everything and all these big moments. Of course, that would make our lives much easier, but that just isn't the world that we live in. And often we might send out some content that will quickly become out of date if it's related to something that's happening in the news as stories change or as politicians change their mind or whatever it might be. So this is an example of also working with Care for Calais again around campaigning against the Bibby Stockholm, which is a barge that is due to house 500 refugees. And you've probably seen this in the news, but of course the kind of conditions on the barge are really really poor, and it's kind of been likened to a prison and things like that. And we're kind of very, like, Care for Calais, very opposed to kind of refugees being housed there. And of course, even since this, we sort of sent these emails, lots more things have happened as well in relation to the Bibby barge. But we basically, Care for Calais had seen some success working with lawyers to actually manage to prevent 20 refugees who were due to be moved to the barge and preventing them from boarding. So we wanted to put out an ask, which was kind of asking for supporters to fundraise for legal fees so that they could work to support covering more, if not all, of the refugees that were due to be moved onto the barge. So we sent this first email on the 8th of August to respond to which was on the day that people were due to be being moved, and that performed really well. We saw an income per recipient that was twice as high as kind of the average for the emails that we'd sent this year. But then the situation worsened, and the government, Kefir Calais found out that the government were actually sending letters to refugees, basically saying that if they refused to board the barge, they would be stripped of their rights to have kind of safe accommodation on land. So as that had, which obviously feels like a threat, so we wanted to talk about that as well. So we basically sent a kind of follow up just to say this situation is rapidly changing. This is what we had done, and we come out and asked you for this money, but actually like it's got worse and we really, really need your help. And that email performed really, really well as well. So it went to the exact same people, and we had a slightly lower income per recipient versus the previous email, but lots of people had already donated, but it was still 1.5 times better than we'd seen, or 1.5 times more than we'd seen for the rest of the series of the year. So that was really brilliant. And of course, now no one is on the barge because there's been an outbreak of Legionella. So kind of as potentially as that situation unfolds, we know that we can respond to that, and that now this is something that Kefir Calais' audience are really really motivated by to give, and it's something that we can keep talking about as and when the situation changes. So that's kind of some case studies, hopefully some interesting things in there, valuable things in there to kind of see how kind of we've done this and how it's sort of improved performance kind of across the board. We're now going to talk about kind of putting this into practice and kind of the actual detail of actually doing this and setting yourself up for success. So firstly, we just wanted to sort of think about some of the challenges that you guys might be facing, that we've heard from different organisations, and we kind of come up against ourselves. So the first one is around that kind of question of resource, so making sure that you kind of, or maybe feeling like you don't have enough staff or enough time outside of your kind of business as usual and your kind of campaigns that you're planning to actually do this work. The second is around maybe not feeling like you've got the kind of internal buy-in, like you're really keen to do this, but potentially not everybody that might touch this in your organisation is really bought into doing this. So that might be a barrier that you kind of need to cross. The third is around kind of branding and the fact that if you're moving at pace, the content that you're putting out is unlikely to be like incredibly polished, but there might be some kind of pushback or some kind of nervousness around wanting to make sure that what goes out is really perfectly aligned with your kind of brand guidelines and your tone of voice. Kind of related to that is this idea of sort of or kind of fear of maybe there being backlash, so putting something out that is quite quick and quite responsive, and perhaps it isn't kind of as carefully cultivated potentially or carefully planned as other kind of content that you might put out, and that might be a bit provocative, or it might be a bit provocative, and you're kind of not totally sure how your audience or kind of the wider public might react to that, and kind of being set up to sort of deal with that, which is obviously a very fair kind of challenge, but I think often that can then lead, how that kind of maybe then plays out is that a bold statement that was the kind of thing that you want to go out with ends up being quite diluted by wanting to sort of mitigate for backlash, that actually it doesn't become as kind of impactful as you kind of had hoped that it might be. And then finally, obviously a lot of this is dependent on having quite a clear and effective process for actually doing this. So I think without having that, it can be quite difficult to kind of know where to start, but also it can be quite difficult to sort of take ownership or know how to take it forward as an individual. So hopefully the things that we talk about now will kind of give you some food for thought about kind of answering some of those challenges. So we've got a bit of a checklist about what we think of forward action you guys need, or organisations need to do this well. So the first, and we'll talk about these in a bit more detail in the kind of coming slides. But the first one is around sort of having someone scanning the news daily. So being really kind of on, like, finger on the pulse about what is going on, and what cultural moments or political kind of political kind of things you might want to be talking about. The second is having a 24-hour sign-off process, which maybe sounds a bit scary, but we'll talk a little bit around kind of how we kind of approach that, and hopefully that will make it seem slightly less scary. The third is around establishing buy-in, kind of across the organisation, but particularly as a kind of for a sort of senior stakeholder who might be the sort of person signing off the kind of content that is going out. The fourth here is around having simple and quick sign-up forms, because if you're asking someone, or you're responding to something quickly and you're asking someone to take action quickly, you need your tech to be able to do that, to allow for that. The fifth is around having kind of content that people understand and care about, and we've got an example about how we tried to do this and it didn't work very well, which will maybe hopefully kind of bring that a bit more to light. And then finally, setting yourself up to kind of have templates that might allow you to do some of this work quite quickly, that have kind of been pre-approved, might be kind of a good thing to kind of think about doing as well. So having templates that might allow you to make those simple graphics that we shared with kind of newspaper clippings, that kind of thing. So we'll talk through these kind of in turn now. So the first one is around someone scanning the news. So I think the first thing I wanted to say here is that we're sort of not expecting this to kind of become someone's full-time job. It's really sort of having it built into your kind of day that you might do this for sort of 5 to 10 minutes each day. I don't know if you're like me, but kind of having a morning coffee, catching up on your emails, that kind of thing could be a really good place just to sort of spend 5 minutes either doing a bit of a Google search to see kind of what's coming up, or one kind of top tip that we have is maybe setting Google alerts for kind of key keywords or kind of key news stories that you're following, so that actually the content comes directly into your inbox and you don't have to go out looking for it. So sort of having kind of that sort of built in as a bit of a process sort of every day, and sort of starting to do that as a bit of a habit is kind of a good starting point there. With all of this, it might not always be that you see something that you think this is relevant for the organization, but it's not relevant to me. But I think that that's kind of a place where you want to basically be sharing that across teams, because it might be useful for somebody else in your organization. So you might not be able to make a kind of, as a campaigner, it might not relate to your campaign, but if it's something that people will understand is related to the issue that you work on, that could make a really good quick donate ask, for example. So you might want to share that with fundraising. The way that we do that for Forward Action is kind of having sort of multi-user kind of Slack channels or kind of Teams channels, where we'll kind of drop things into that, and then people can take the bits that are relevant to them and kind of run with that within their projects. Figuring out what teams and which roles this is best kind of built into. As I say, I think this is relevant to like everybody that works at the organization, but it's probably most relevant to kind of fundraising and kind of campaigning teams. So potentially having somebody from each team, or making sure that there's kind of cross communication and there's just one person who this kind of can build this into their role, is kind of a good thing to sort of think about doing. And then once you've kind of looked at, you've scanned the news, you've seen a story that you think might be really interesting to sort of develop some creative or a messaging or a kind of action off the back of, it's really good to then sort of interrogate that using a decision-making process that we'll talk about on the next slide, which will kind of help you identify, like, is it worth progressing, basically? Because obviously we're all very busy and we want to make sure that what we're doing is really impactful. So I apologise in advance for this not pretty at all slide, but it's a kind of a sort of I guess a bit of a kind of Ms. Magazine quiz, if you ever took those, of how you might sort of decide whether this is something that you actually want to progress or not. So we start kind of at the top here, where you found your opportunity. The first question I'd probably ask yourself is it relevant and is it easy to understand? Like, does it relate to our issue in some way? And also, does it make sense? Like, will people make that connection? Can you easily communicate that connection? If you can't, I'd probably leave it well alone. But if you can, the next thing that I would ask is, can you attach an existing supporter action? The reason we're talking about existing supporter actions is that's because that is already a predefined thing that you've already had signed off and you're working towards, and you know it's a kind of organizational goal is to like achieve this supporter action, whether it's donating or campaigning, whatever. But it also helps you get, so it will help you get to something quicker, it'll help you get something out the door quicker, because it's already been pre-approved and you're basically just adding another kind of messaging angle to this wider supporter action into the mix. If you can attach a supporter action, brilliant. The next thing I'd probably ask is about kind of how meaty is this story? Is it something that maybe is relevant, but maybe it wouldn't kind of, you can't bulk it out into kind of a full email and kind of make that kind of case as to kind of why you're putting supporter action out in front of you, or can you? So if you can, we probably recommend then turning it into an email, as well as using kind of Facebook ads campaigns to drive to the campaign action as well, but definitely having a kind of an email where you know that it's going, you can kind of talk to your kind of warmer list, and you can kind of get content out in front of them there. If it isn't meaty enough for an email, do not fear, you can definitely still use this. But what you might want to look at doing is just testing it with drafting a couple of kind of new ad variants and new kind of graphic assets and putting that into like an existing campaign that you're already running. So just literally, we're talking 2 or 3 ads here, testing that messaging and seeing if it works. If you can't attach a supporter action, what we probably would want to then ask is, whether you can attach a new support action to this. So does it feel like, again, does it kind of, that kind of comes back to that impact and that kind of meatiness of the story? Does it feel like something that you can say, you can kind of you can make a really clear connection to something that you want a supporter to do? If you can't, I probably wouldn't progress it. But if you can, again, similarly, it's like comes back to that point of like, does it feel really impactful and will it inspire action? If it doesn't, again, I probably wouldn't progress it. But if it does, what we'd recommend here is progressing it, but trying to get there with like the least friction as possible. So for example, if it was a story where you think, I reckon I can ask for someone to make a donation off the back of it, but our main donate page, like the copy doesn't quite work, we would just recommend cloning that existing donate page, tweaking some of the copy, and maybe updating the image. Very, very quick kind of low level amendments, but get that to a place quite quickly where you know that the actual page and the form and all of the kind of text side of it works well, but you're just basically updating the messaging, and then you can get that out kind of quicker. So that's kind of thinking about, do I actually want to use this? And when you do kind of want to use it, we're talking here about wanting to then establish a kind of that sort of 24-hour sign-off process. So first things first, you kind of want to really get somebody who's kind of at a level in which they can sign something off, and the kind of book will stop with them, and they're really bought into this process. So that is sort of something that you want to kind of do first, kind of establishing that sort of that kind of senior sign-off person. Once you've found something that you want to progress, we really recommend sort of, and you'll be doing this kind of within that mind map already, but we recommend thinking about, what is the CTA, like what are you asking people to do, what is the format that you're going to use? Is it an email? Is it a new campaign action? Is it just a couple of new ads? And what is the hook, like how are you going to talk about this message? And an example of that for kind of Care for Calais would be like, this is a BBC News headline from back in June. The Rwanda policy, the government, Suella Braverman said, the government are committed to this plan. So for example, we might look at that and say, okay, we want to use this. The hook is that the government aren't stopping, but together as an organisation, as a movement, and with enough donations, we can campaign to stop them. We've already got a donate page set up, so we're just going to draft a couple of ads with this headline. We might even just put this headline on a kind of plain background, and a call to action is to drive donations, because that is what we're telling supporters, and that is the angle that we're kind of going after. So what I'd recommend doing is kind of literally just jotting down CTA format, hook, how are you going to use this, sending that to the person who is the senior stakeholder and asking them to hold a bit of time, because and kind of say, do you agree, do you give this green light, because I'm going to draft some copy and we're going to get this running. Once send that message to the person, sign off, asking them to hold the time, we want to get this out quickly, we need your time. If you need to brief a new action page, this example, we're not suggesting that you do that, but for example, if you kind of move through that mind map and you're sort of like, okay, I actually want to create a new action, brief the kind of relevant people that you might need to sort of support on, so that they can also hold time. And then we recommend spending literally only a couple of hours drafting some new copy, sourcing imagery, and creating a new graphic, for example. Here it's all about speed, really. So it's about not being like, this is not going to be completely perfect. I might not be a copywriter, but I have a good enough understanding of like what I want to get out. I have a good enough understanding of our tone of voice, and I'm just going to give it a go. And it's all about kind of speed, the need for speed. So once you sort of spent a couple of hours doing that, send it to your senior stakeholder for sign off. It's just one person and another person. Try and get their feedback within a couple of hours. And then you will have another couple of hours basically to take their edits on board, do the build that you need to do of kind of ads, emails, pages, etc. And then you can send it back to the person who needs to sign it off with everything in situ. And kind of recommend sending things in situ. And I guess, what we mean by that is basically sending them the actual test of the email or screenshots of how the ads will actually display, just so that they can sign it all off in terms of kind of what it looks like visually and the copy all in one go. And then you're in position that you can just basically flick the switch and get things live. So that is kind of how we would sort of recommend kind of doing this within the kind of process of sort of 24 hours. There are a couple of tips that we've got for sort of thinking about how you can kind of establish that buy-in and that sort of senior stakeholder, and also be in a position where you can write copy and feel quite confident that what you're writing and how you're going to go about it is going to be kind of like widely approved, and also how just to kind of think about putting this into practice and kind of getting an understanding of whether this works or not. So the first thing around getting buy-in is about really trying to show your colleagues the size of the opportunity. So I think you're all here because you know, and lots of you already started doing this, if not all of you. So you understand that this is really great in terms of kind of driving more action, more income, and kind of getting to real world change quicker. But you sort of might need to bring some of your kind of colleagues on the journey with you. So hopefully some of the case studies in this deck might help, but any examples that you can share about where you've tested this and how it's had an impact on performance to really start sort of establishing the kind of reason for doing this would be like a really good thing to do. Secondly, you should have kind of red line sort of guidelines as an organisation. So getting the brand team or the comms team or whoever it is that kind of owns this to share those with you in advance is basically almost kind of getting kind of that sign off at that level of like, you know what you can't do. So everything else is kind of sort of free game, a fair game, because what you're looking at isn't something perfectly polished, but it's about being able to respond quickly and getting something that does roughly fit within your kind of tone of voice and hasn't kind of crossed any red lines. And then the third thing that we recommend trying is doing a trial run. So make up an emergency and then run your process through and see how it works. And then that will give you a really clear kind of understanding of like where there's any friction within the process, whether the right people have kind of been bought into it, and kind of will give you a basis of kind of, okay, did we manage to get the thing out the door within 24 hours? If not, then you can kind of come back to the drawing board and figure out where in the journey it's not quite working and how you might want to improve the process. I'm going to pass back over to Eve now, who is going to talk through some of the kind of other bits in the checklist that we sort of recommended that you need to kind of do this well.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. So at Forward Action, we're always advocates for really easy to use, simple forms. But as Beth's kind of already mentioned, when you're trying to disrupt supporters and say, we need your help urgently, we need you to take this action quickly, it's really important that they can actually do that. And so keeping your user experience kind of really simple and clean is really important. So making sure that there's not loads of fields for supporters to fill out. It's really clear where they need to click and add data. And as part of that, only asking for data that you actually really need, I think is a really good way to keep your forms nice and lean. And then your copy around your forms and in your forms as well should be really short and to the point. I think especially if you've sent an email out where you've done the work, set the scene, kind of got people fired up to take action, when you've got them clicking through onto the page, whether it's a donate form or a petition form or whatever, make it as easy as possible, reduce all the distractions. And this is something Beth alluded to earlier as well, but making sure that your content is kind of easy to understand, and not just your content, but the link between your work and the issue that you're kind of jumping on, making sure that link is really easily understandable by the general public. And so when the war in Ukraine was heavily in the news, kind of particularly around its impact on global supply chains, we tested reactive content with Action Against Hunger because the war's impact on these supply chains was directly linked to global hunger, particularly in the area they were working in East Africa. And so we wanted to bring that to light in our ad copy. But I think this variant wasn't as effective as other variants that we tested, largely because the connection between the war in Ukraine and then the hunger crisis in the context of East Africa is not just something that people think about very often and wasn't widely understood. So particularly in the context of these ads, didn't have the kind of cut through that we were hoping when we had this breaking news style graphic. And then, yeah, something that will help you with that all-important speed of getting something off the ground really quickly is having ready-to-use templates. So we really recommend investing in a tool. We use Canva, or just something that will help you generate graphics really quickly. And you can build templates, and then, so for instance, if you wanted a breaking news graphic, set that all up within your brand guidelines, and then as the news story breaks, you can just drop your relevant headlines into that. And ideally, yeah, your brand team or whoever has sign off will sign off the templates ahead of time, so that then you're empowered to progress your campaign and get it live as quickly as possible. Great. We've just got a couple final thoughts now just to make the most of these opportunities for you and give you some top tips. So thanks, Beth. Yeah, first of all, we've already kind of mentioned this, and Beth's flowchart's really helpful in deciding it, but you don't always need a new action. Don't make more work for yourself than you need to. We often see great results just from tweaking existing pages and adding new variants and just making sure that the content is really timely and relevant. And then as things change, do keep contacting your supporters, send them lots of updates, give them different ways to get involved. If you could have a campaign action and a donate action, that's really powerful. But yeah, people want to hear from you. And when the campaign progresses, that's a really natural time for you to get back in touch. And then finally, we've talked about graphics and how great they can be, but don't be afraid to just use raw kind of authentic footage and content. Often supporters really resonate with that, particularly in these reactive moments, because it seems more genuine. And then finally, when you're sitting down to write your messaging, we've just got some top tips and tactics here to really make the most of this opportunity. So when you're trying to evoke a sense of urgency in your supporters, don't underestimate the power of just sticking the word urgent in your creative, particularly right at the front in capital letters. It really does get that message across and get the supporters' attention. We've talked about social proof as a tool. So when you're really demonstrating that there's a movement of people taking these actions, if you can speak to how many people might have signed a petition already or donated to your cause, then that's a really compelling reason for other people to get involved. Providing updates at different milestones, whether that's milestones in the actual campaign or the news story, or if it's milestones that you've kind of come up with a bit more creatively, or milestones with your fundraising, then yeah, they're just great opportunities again to hook the supporter in and get them interested. This one won't always be relevant, but if you can link to a calendar moment, that can add extra relevance. So that's something that we did with Stonewall in the email around World Refugee Day, and that worked really well. And then finally, because if there's a really clear hook and link between your cause and this news issue, the case for support's really clear and people are kind of fired up and ready to take action. When you're thinking about donations, think about testing higher prompts than usual, so you can really drive up that average gift and make full use of this opportunity that you've got by being reactive. And that's our whistle stop tour done. I'll hand over to Stella.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That was really interesting, and I've been keeping notes as well as you've been speaking. We've had a few questions through, and we have about 10 minutes or so to go through them. And like I said at the beginning, if we don't get to your question now, please don't worry, we will make sure that we address it and we write up the answer and we'll publish it. So I'll start with a couple of questions that were clarifying on some of the examples that you shared, some of the case studies. The first one is about the Care for Calais example. So you said that the second email was sent to the same audience. And so the person wants to know whether the people who had donated to the first email were removed or if they were also included in the second ask. Do you remember that?
Eve, you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we sent it just to the same list. So we didn't remove anybody. I think that the reason for that is that it was a new, the people who had already donated obviously really care about the issue, and we were then telling them, we were giving them a further support, further case for support by saying, and this other thing has happened and it's now getting worse. We wouldn't, and I think that there are ways that you can talk to your list about being very candid about when you ask for money and the reason that you need it. And of course, people won't always be able to donate a second time, but lots of people will, and they will donate a second time. So I think that we'd probably recommend, particularly in these instances, not to segment your list and probably just send it to everybody, because you've got a really valid reason for asking for the money, and that's what is going into the content.
Perfect. Great. That's brilliant. Thank you. And the second, I guess, clarifying question is on the Greenpeace one, whether we sent the Blue Planet email when the program was actually live on TV.
Yes, we did. Yeah. So it was kind of written before the end of the series. So it was sort of mid-series. And we kind of referenced that within the email. So I've been watching the episodes each week, and this is what I've seen and this is how I felt. And then just, there was an example in that email. It was very zoomed in, so you wouldn't have probably read it, but it kind of referenced an actual clip that had actually happened within one of the episodes, saying last night's episode, I think it was about a whale and seeing her calf die, which was obviously really distressing, and was kind of able to reference that specific story within the episode, and that just, anybody that had watched that episode, it will probably still be thinking about it the next day, and then they've got a very coherent sort of tie to what they've seen and how they felt, and then something that they can then do about it, basically.
Perfect. Great. Lovely. So now we have some more kind of, I guess, bigger questions. The first one is, how do you scale paid social quickly in reactive moments if you only got a short window, and balancing it with the algorithm's learning phase?
It's a brilliant question. So I think that what I'd probably recommend doing, so the learning phase, you can move out of the learning phase within 50 conversions. So what I'd probably do is, you can do some kind of quick maths on like how much budget you might need to get out of the learning phase quickly. Obviously, if you've a very easy example for my early morning brain would be 50 quid if you've got a cost per acquisition of £1, and that's what your tool is. So you'd probably want to look at spending, you might put like £100 behind the ads in day one, knowing that hopefully you'll get out of the learning phase within half a day, and then you can start seeing how it performs. So that's probably how I'd approach it if it was me.
Right. Perfect. Then we have, so there's one question around audiences and whether we found any particular audience that works best for reactive ads, if it's classic lookalike audiences, or if there's more nuance to it.
I'm happy to jump in on this one. I think a lot of the time we test different audiences, but time and time again, a broad audience on Facebook and Twitter seems to work really well. Kind of letting Facebook's algorithm do the work for you. I think especially when you're reacting to news articles, and it's hard to define kind of who's seen them or who's going to be necessarily have the most connection to them. Yeah, we find letting Facebook do the work is a tried and tested tactic.
Great. There's more questions coming through as we speak, by the way, so I know for a fact that we won't be able to answer them all. I'm really sorry about that, but like I said, we will get to them in writing. Somebody's asking, how does this process work in very small teams, for example, where fundraising, brand, copy, web are all just a couple of people? And I know that some of our partners really are like just work in very small teams. So any thoughts on how this process can work in a very small setting?
I can jump in with some thoughts, even if, I think that probably sounds really beneficial, to be honest. The fewer people involved, probably the better. You're more likely to be able to be super reactive. I think the thing that I would probably suggest is what we're kind of trying to allude to is sort of having someone who kind of owns this, and like establishing that and making sure that everyone knows who that is. So building this, I guess, into kind of into someone's role, having that kind of 5-10 minutes a day just sort of built in as like a thing that you do, and then you share anything within like an organizational channel. To be honest, having a smaller organization or a smaller team to me feels like you're going to be able to do this much more efficiently and more quickly. So I think it's probably just about establishing, as I say, like who is going to be owning this and who is signing it off. And it might work for you that everyone weighs into it, as long if you are a really small team. That's probably something that you need to have a conversation about, but having very clear, like setting your kind of clear deadlines with, this person does this thing, and then the feedback needs to be within an hour. And if someone can't feedback, be very strict about that. Give people time limits, because you are on a timer trying to kind of respond to this. Yeah,
absolutely agree. We have a couple of questions about health, from health related causes, and people are saying, oh, do we have any examples of health charities moving quickly? We can be on the slower side sometimes, and also the campaigning issues within health can move quite slowly, and it can be hard to keep up momentum and urgency when change takes so long. Any tips on how to do that in messaging and copy? I guess they're slightly different questions, but they're both about, I guess, how to make that work in the health sector.
Yeah, I think we might want to take that one away a little bit and just have a bit of a think about that and try and pull out some examples where we've worked on that. There was one thing that kind of sprung to mind that I sort of didn't touch upon that might be useful potentially, but I think one of the things I kind of see about just starting to do this work is it kind of will make you think, when you're looking at like, is this relevant to my organization? Can I fit this into the work that we talk about in our issue? I think it will help you get to a stage where you sort of think a little bit more out of the box about like, the work that you do and kind of connecting movements. So we had an interesting discussion yesterday about this, which was around, for example, when Roe v. Wade hit last year, obviously that was about abortion rights. And so there might be organizations that kind of work in that space that will want to be talking about it. But if you zoom out of that, it's about bodily autonomy. And therefore that if you're working for an organization that is advocating for trans rights, or you might be working for an organization who is working for kind of like dignity at the end of life, for example, all of those things are quite connected. And you can talk about body autonomy, but then 3 different organizations who campaign on very different issues have a connective kind of web and sort of connecting fights and creating like a sense of a wider movement could be a way of thinking about that. So it might not be, I don't think I've totally answered your question, but I think there's something in like thinking about how other people are using it and whether there's like a step up from that campaigning issue, whether there's a way of connecting the dots in like a broader kind of umbrella sense, and whether that could be something to test, basically.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. I think we only have time for one more question, and then the rest we will get back to in writing, including the one from Emma that I just saw in the chat. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I have thoughts on that. I think we all do. So somebody's asking, if this model can be adapted for support acquisition instead of fundraising? They're based in South Africa, where access fundraising is a little bit different. And I would think yes, but what do you think?
Yeah, I can jump in again. So we have done this for acquisition, definitely, particularly around the examples you mentioned with Care for Calais around the Stop Rwanda campaign. They were sending supporters to a sort of petition style fundraiser where supporters add their name kind of in support of they want to scrap the plan. So that was a very much supporter acquisition, and we saw that work really, really well in generating leads at a lovely kind of low cost per acquisition. But then not only that, taking them forward and giving them further actions where they do take make a donation or take a further action that you kind of offer to them. So they are useful leads as well, not just those kind of like cheap low hanging fruit that doesn't go anywhere.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think we'll have to wrap up because I notice also people need to go to other meetings. I'm sure that's the case for many of you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We hope it was a useful session. We have lots more questions